try this. Close your eyes and take yourself back to when you were at school. Imagine yourself sitting in the classroom. It could be a foreign language lesson or history or maths. The teacher has just taught you something and then they ask, "Do you understand?" Most of your classmates look down at the table. One or two nod their heads reticently and the teacher moves on. So the teacher has asked this question to check your understanding of what they've just taught. Was it an effective technique to check understanding? Not really, no. And it's the same in the language. You can open your eyes again, sorry. It's the same in the language classroom. So if you ask, "Do you understand?" the almost inevitable response from your students will be yes. But do they understand? Well, maybe. Or maybe they're just saying yes to make you happy or to save face. Or maybe they think they understand, but actually they don't. So simply asking students if they understand is not a useful or effective way to check understanding. So what else can we do? Well, you look at some different techniques on the course, but two of the most popular and most effective are eliciting examples and asking questions. Imagine you've just taught used to, using a context including the sentence, "I used to smoke when I was younger." Let's think about used to. So we're using it to talk about past habits or states that are no longer true. So to check your student understands, you can ask them for an example about themselves. If the student says, "I used to have long hair," and you can see they now have short hair, you can be pretty sure they understand. However, if they say, "I used to have long hair," and you can see they still have long hair, they definitely don't. So in this case, you'll need to go back and look at the use of used to again. And had you not elicited this incorrect example, you wouldn't know if the student understood or not. So the other technique is to ask your student questions. So maybe you've just introduced this sentence. "I used to smoke when I was younger." Now we want to ask some questions to check students understand what used to means in this sentence. So to do this, we need to think carefully about what it means or how it's used. So we use it to talk about past habits or states that are no longer true. Now, is there anything else that we need to consider? Think about this sentence. "I used to smoke on the 5th of December, 1995. Does that work? No. So we can't use used to for single occasions, only for habits or states. So let's write some simple sentences that summarize the meaning or the use of used to in the same context. So I used to smoke when I was younger. So this means I smoked when I was younger. It was a habit, or maybe we can simplify this to I did it many times. And I don't smoke now. So these three sentences fully summarize the meaning or the use of used to in this context. Now, what do we do with these sentences? If we just say them to our students, we're committing that cardinal sin of explaining or lecturing. So let's not do that. Let's do something very simple. Let's just switch these statements into questions. So I smoked when I was younger becomes, did I smoke when I was younger? And the answer we want is yes. I did it many times, i.e. not just once. So did I do it once or many times? The expected answer is many times. And I don't smoke now. Do I smoke now? The expected answer is no. Now, in this lesson, after we've introduced the language in the context of a short story or an anecdote, we can ask students these questions to check they understand. Now, you'll remember we previously talked about ICQs or instruction checking questions. These are essentially the same, but for language concepts rather than instructions. Therefore, we call them CCQs or concept checking questions. And they're effective because, unlike explaining or lecturing, they demand a response from students. And unlike do you understand, they demand a real response. Now, CCQs are disliked by some people for being patronising or unnecessary. My response to that is simple. Don't ask CCQs when they're patronising or unnecessary. So if you're teaching vocabulary and the word is pencil, if you've already shown students an actual pencil or a picture of a pencil, you don't need to ask, can you write with it? Is it made of wood? Etc. That's patronising and completely unnecessary. But that doesn't mean all CCQs are. There's nothing mysterious or magical about CCQs. They are simply explanations flipped around into questions. That's it. However, that doesn't mean they're easy, and they do take practice. So the key thing here is to always script them, write them down rather than trying to formulate them on the spot in the lesson. Here are some top tips for CCQs. Top tip number 1, use reference material. So we said above that you should start by writing sentences or statements of meaning before you turn these into questions. In order to help you with this, use reference materials. If it's grammar, use one of the 2 grammar reference books I've mentioned. Here they are below. They'll have a simple description or definition of the use of whatever grammar point you're focusing on. If it's vocabulary, use a dictionary. For example, the Cambridge Learner Dictionary. Top tip number 2, keep it simple. So make sure the language in the CCQs is not more complex than the language you're checking. So for example, if you've taught the phrase blown away by, as in I was blown away by the concert last night, and you want to check understanding, you could ask, was I amazed? Yes. Was I surprised? Yes. The language in these questions is simpler than the language you're teaching. However, asking, did it take my breath away? Yes. Was I absolutely flabbergasted? Yes, will not help because the student is unlikely to understand this language. And then you'll end up having to teach what flabbergasted and take my breath away mean. Keep it simple. Top tip number 3, avoid using the language you're checking in the CCQ. So if the sentence is, I've been learning English for 3 years, and you're checking have been learning, which is present perfect continuous, avoid asking, have I been studying for a short time or a long time? Because you're using the target language, i.e. the language you're focusing on in the CCQ. And if the student doesn't understand this, present perfect continuous, they won't be able to understand your question. So here you could ask, did I start learning English 3 years ago? Yes. And am I still learning English now? Yes. Neither of these questions uses present perfect continuous, so the students should understand them fine. So, to summarize, avoid do you understand and instead use techniques which demand a real response from students. So, for example, you can elicit examples or you can ask concept checking questions.